The best thing about content is it helps to create a human connection. Your client or potential clients, to trust you, they have to know who you are and what you really do. When you're putting out content, you're putting out a lot of different feelers, and you never know who you're going to actually touch.
Marketing, like a symphony, is a harmonious blend of instruments, but without the proper direction, it's just noise. Welcome to the Supply Chain Marketing Show, presented by Supply Chain Brain Media. From the art of storytelling to the science of data, we'll uncover marketing strategies that drive success. In a marketplace crowded with lookalike solutions, similar messaging, and endless noise, one thing still separates the companies that win from those that struggle for attention: trust. In this episode, Ralph Henderson sits down with content creating leader Lisa Keller to explore why content remains one of the most underutilized growth strategies in supply chain marketing. Now, here's your host, guide, Ralph, trust me, Henderson.
Branding creates lust. Content makes you fall in love. Welcome to the Supply Chain Marketing Show, brought to you by Supply Chain Brain Media. I'm Ralph Henderson, your host and executive producer. In a world obsessed with clicks, algorithms, and instant gratification, we sometimes forget a simple truth. People do business with people they trust. And trust isn't built through logos or sales pitches. It's built through stories and relationships. Content is how we show our audience that we understand them. It's how we demonstrate empathy, expertise, and experience. Content is king, but clarity is queen, and together they create connection. The companies winning today aren't always the loudest. They're the ones consistently educating their market and telling stories that matter. Because when a prospect meets you at a trade show and already knows your point of view and what you stand for, you're no longer introducing yourself, you're reinforcing trust that's already been built. Today, we're discussing why content remains one of the most powerful tools in marketing, why so many organizations still underinvest in it, and how great storytelling helps supply chain providers stand out in an increasingly crowded marketplace. Joining me today is Lisa Keller, copy editor at Supply Chain Brain. Lisa has spent years helping companies shape and refine their stories through sponsored content, special projects, editorial development, and publishing. Beyond the supply chain industry, her background spans journalism, book editing, social justice advocacy, and even film production, giving her a unique perspective on why stories connect people and why words still matter. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks. Really appreciate having you here. And your topic is so important in this world of marketing and all the noise that's going on right now, and how important it is for us to create trust with our marketplace. One of the things I wanted to ask you right off the bat was, why and how does content really matter today, and what's so good about it?
Well, I think that the best thing about content is it helps to create a human connection. People, might think with, the advent of AI and all, that human connection is passé, but I would say thinking that's passé is passé.
I like it.
And people really are actually yearning for a human connection. You can see it in the way people interact with each other. People are getting together, they're playing board games, they're listening to vinyl records as opposed to digital stuff, because there's just a richer human piece that content can help you to provide.
Yeah, no, I think that's so eloquently put. An easy example of that is how the written greeting card has come back. right? Now, when you get a written greeting card, everybody's all excited. And I think you're spot on with regard to AI. You know, AI is obviously an evolution and something that's prevalent now everywhere. However, the human touch is the thing that people are going to long for. We're already talking about that in social media, how everything's starting to look a little watered down. So that human touch that you talk about in content is critical, and what you do is important for how that works for the supply chain. So the next question is, how can the supply chain marketing person's company stand out in this space? Like, what's the importance of context and how should they use it in their marketing toolbox?
Well, this is where, we talk about trust. Um, in order to get someone, your client or potential clients, to trust you, they have to know who you are and what you really do. And so, all kinds of flashy advertising is great and that draws people in. But, once you're there, you're talking to a human being. Somebody is writing something that, that shows that they really care about their product, and that creates trust.
Yeah, no, in your opening that I used at the top of the show with branding being lust and content being love is so appropriate. I mean, the easy metaphor is when you first meet someone, obviously it's an external attraction, but over time you're going to need to know what's inside. And that's what content is, and that's what you do, that's what you help people with, and that's what's so important in supply chain marketing right now. So why aren't we gung ho about content? Why? I mean, what's the obstacles that people are having focusing on good content as part of a marketing strategy?
Well, first of all, big obstacles are time and money. Are you going to, have an expert from your company take time away from their busy day to write a piece, and to say, to be able to actually hone in. And it takes time, and promoting it takes money. Figuring out how to get the most bang for your buck, and the thing about content is it's kind of like a slow burn. There's no instant gratification with it. It's part of building your brand that isn't necessarily that easily seen. And so I think it sometimes becomes hard for marketing execs to promote it as part of a package because it just takes time for the benefits of it to show.
Yeah, and you're bringing up such a good point. And oftentimes I think about when the roles are reversed and the person who is responsible for creating the content or asking for the content to be created is affected when something they're looking to invest in has done that. In other words, they might be looking for a solution, whether it be in the supply chain or even in their personal lives, and how whomever it is they're looking at has created a story through content, and that's what attracts them to that solution or that product. It would be interesting for them to think about, well, how do I do that for my company and my solution? So in that instance, what advice would you give the supply chain marketing person who's thinking about how can I make this something that I would be attracted to if I were the ideal client profile of my solution? And how do I get the folks who I'm trying to talk to about creating this to view it as important and to make it a priority?
Well, I mean, I think you have to put yourself in, as you say, in the shoes of a potential client. And, you got to realize that, when you're putting out content, you're putting out a lot of different feelers, and you never know who you're going to actually touch.
Mm.
And, in other words, we might end up with potential clients you don't even know that would be interested in what you do. But when they see a really specific thing and they make a connection, that's where it starts to show. you know I mean,
Yeah, no, I do.
I think about like the depth of things, and I think about, for example, like when I was a kid, right, we used to go to the beach in Florida, and there would be a little plane flying over with a banner, and it said, "Eat at Joe's." So I would always point at it and I'd go, "Dad, what is that? What does that mean?" Right. And so he took me to Joe's Stone Crab restaurant, and I was able to taste it, see it, smell it, take in the whole atmosphere. And that's actually what content is.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And another thing that you touched on that I would love to get your opinion on is in the supply chain space for the people who are in marketing and responsible for the content to attract ultimately somebody to invest in their solution. It's a long sales cycle for one thing. And the other thing is they go through what's called the buyer's journey, right? So a lot of people think with these big solutions that I have to go to the decision maker or the person, who's stroking the check or can approve the investment. But really, the reality of it is the content needs to address everybody in the buyer's journey. I mean, a little plug for Supply Chain Brain is, that is really for people of all walks of life, right? I mean, you're talking to people who are entry level to engineers to operations, up through the leadership and obviously the ownership of the organization. Can you talk to the audience a little bit about your journey as a content developer and their journey as somebody who's trying to reach out to those folks looking for that solution?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, I kind of come in towards the end of that decision-making process. Um, for example, when people are just when marketers are deciding, how are we going to do this? You first have to figure out how you're going to allocate your money, right? And then you have to figure out who your target audience is, how to reach them. And indeed, plug for Supply Chain Brain. There's quality and there's a big outreach. And so when you find that, then you realize, okay, this is going to reach my target audience, right? And then you have to figure out, okay, what's the style? Like, what's the style that's going to reach my target audience? So you could have a case study, you could have a listicle, and so you have a lot of variety in ways that you can present it. So that will hit all these different levels within the company. And, you have to figure out who's your expert, who's going to reach the most people, and who's going to write it. What's their
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And you're bringing up another good point, and maybe you can expound on it a little bit. The different formats, because an executive, obviously, you hear the executive brief, right? So the executive wants this brief, but the engineer or the operations person, they might want something that's got some more meat on it. They might want something that's got some more detail on it. So when you're working with people in the supply chain space and you're creating this content, what are you seeing and what kind of direction can you give people on maybe how that works or what they should be thinking about?
Well, I would say the very first thing that I would recommend would be a case study,
Mm.
because that actually allows you to really show what you know, show what you've done for, another client, and they're also speaking on your behalf. So it's kind of it's not quite as subjective. It becomes more objective when, it's clear that, you've done a really good job for this person, and this is actually why,
Yeah, and people don't like to be first, do they? I mean, a lot of times, what you're doing with the case study is like, well, I'm not the first person to make this decision, and so therefore, it feels like it's got a little bit more credibility or trust on it. So that's really important.
That to me. And then I think that, a list format is really,
Mhm.
really helpful too, because, when you have bullet points and you point out exactly what you can do, then let's say the engineer will focus on number three, and they'll say, okay, I'm looking for, a way to institute AI into my, last mile delivery, specifically this. And, so one of those questions may just answer that for them.
Right. Yeah. No. And I mean, look, we're in the supply chain space. People love lists. They love metrics. I mean, a bar graph here and there is always nice.
We'll be back after this brief message.
In today's complex supply chain, marketing has never been more critical. But are you leveraging the full potential of your marketing efforts? Supply Chain Brain Media created 2 resources to help you discover what's new and what works. The Supply Chain Marketing Group series is designed to educate you on services and how to implement them into your marketing program. On the Supply Chain Marketing Show, hear firsthand how experts are implementing the elements from the 5 rings of supply chain marketing to drive results. Ready to elevate your marketing game? Schedule a 30-minute consult today. Email Morgan at supplychainbrainmedia.com. Supply Chain Brain Media, your guide to marketing success.
And now back to our show.
So one of the things that I think you've done really well with in helping, this audience is, things that are before and after their own events, whether they be trade shows or user conferences. I mean, the supply chain marketing person is big into events, big into activity, but there does need to be content that comes either before those events, after those events, connecting those events. What kind of things have you seen, and what kind of advice would you give on people who are maybe thinking, hey, how can I create content for before or after or in between something I'm already doing?
Well, I mean, I think it's really important to front load, right? I mean, you should be already known before you get to any, conference, convention, anywhere. And really one way to do that is through content. Obviously podcasts, webinars, all of that. But content is something that's great because it's an article that you can point to. The reader can go back and look at it again and take different points from it. So you get to conference or convention and people recognize you, you know, and they have a connection with you. They might say, hey, I remember you're the guy that talked about building robots in your garage when you were a kid,
Right.
right?
Right.
So, it already gives you a leg up. And
No, I like that a lot. And for those who do want the metrics, and this might be, me being guilty of burying the lead here, but, as far as shows are concerned, research has come out recently that has shown less than 5% of people who go to shows are actually looking for the solution at the time of the show. So one of the things I hear a lot from the people who are doing these is, well, what can I do about that? And, up until recently, it's been a challenge. But, now with technology and as you mentioned earlier, with AI helping, we can create something between these shows that allow us to touch people, the other 95%. But I think what you said is really valid about the human touch. So AI is something that they can certainly have into the process. But at the end of the day, there needs to be that empathy. There needs to be that emotion. There needs to be that human touch that you're talking about. The next question I have, as far as writing goes, I'm a big fan of going after the pain of what people are going through. And the reason for that isn't because I'm a masochist, I promise. The reason for that is greater than 80% of people in the supply chain space are investing in solutions to minimize or mitigate pain. But I don't think as supply chain marketing professionals, we do enough to address the pain or to at least illuminate the pain. What would you say about that? And then how could somebody do something about that?
well, I mean, I think it comes down to, I'll tell you my story and then you tell me yours, right? I mean, I think that, part of creating content and seeing what you can actually do and making that apparent then opens up the space for the person that's in pain, let's just say, looking for the solution. It opens up the space for them to come to you specifically and say, oh, I've heard your story. Well, this is my story. And for you to be able to listen to that story and be able to see, you can then, it opens up to asks them, not can we help you? And are we, will we work for you? But we know that we will. And where do we fit in? And I think that that really helps to stop the bleeding, as you'd say.
Yeah, no, I love it. And again, the reason I bring that up is, I've seen some of your stuff and you do such a good job in helping people with the empathy. I mean, that was part of the open as far as what we were going to talk about today. And that is, the prospective investor of the solution needs to know you empathize with them. So talk about empathy, experience, expertise that you talked about in the top of the show as far as the description of what we're talking about today, and how do you incorporate that into the content?
I feel like content, I relate it to music, you know, and, if you create a vibe that people can trust, then they will know that there's empathy in what you're doing. And that, you're going to help them write those lyrics and write that piece of music, and they will trust that you can do that. And that's the empathy. So, in other words, say, I know that this, and this are pain points for you. I am sure that I'm the one that can help you solve them.
I love
Do
the
that through
metaphor
content.
of writing the song. That is so perfect because people understand that. They understand the structure of a song. And we also understand how powerful music and lyrics are. So if the supply chain marketer listening today to this podcast is thinking, hey, how do I do this? Well, think about it as writing a song. And one of the things, Lisa, I would love for you to encourage these folks is, they're not alone. I mean, Supply Chain Brain's been around for 30 years. You guys know what's going on in this industry, and how people are working and providing some of these things. So as far as writing that song is concerned and getting with the supply chain marketing professional, what would you say would be a great next step for them as far as what they should do?
I think that, first of all, just for supply chain brain, I would read it. I would go on the website and check it out and see, where you think you might fit in. And, then start to figure out a marketing campaign that includes content as a really basic and important part. Um, in other words, just to be really open to it, because it really is an integral part of any marketing campaign, I think that we do it really well. I mean, the quality of the writing of on the website just shows that you'll be fitting into something that's already highly regarded and well written.
Right. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So here's a great question, and hopefully you've got some insight. So let's say I do some of these things we've talked about today. Let's say I create content. Let's say I get AI to help me, but I put the human touch in it, and I do, some sort of a listicle, or I do some sort of a featured report or whatever it is. So how do I know it's working? How do I know content is actually working for me?
Like I said, it is a slow burn, and I think it works as part of a larger marketing package. I don't have like a lot of statistics that I could show you. Um, but I do know uh, that the companies that are using content as part of their package always want to do more.
Mm.
In other words, it's kind of like its own case study. They come back and they're like, "Oh yeah, this really helped us."
So it's really just getting over the hurdle of actually doing it and getting involved in it. No, that's fascinating.
I mean,
Uh,
I also think it helps internally, and you can see it when you are able to define what your vision is. Even within your own company, that also is really helpful. And then, it gets the gears moving and people start working together better. So it's part of that too. It's part of the internal process as well.
Right. No, that's really powerful. And look, folks out there listening and watching, as far as supply chain marketing is concerned, more research has just recently come out. Over three-quarters of the people looking for solutions in the supply chain space have done research and almost made their decision prior to ever meeting you, prior to ever coming to a show, prior to ever engaging. So where did they get that information? How did they make that decision? Content. So if you're asking yourself, why do I care about this and why does it matter? Because more and more people are doing research now to make big decisions, and then they're validating it at the show, or they're validating it by reaching out to you. So Lisa, as we close the show, what would be the thing you would want this audience to remember from what we've talked about today as it relates to content? And then what would be the one thing you would want them to do so they feel like, ooh, this was a really good podcast, and this is what I learned, and this is what I'm doing?
Well, I mean, I would want them to take away that content is what really helps you to stand out. A client who's about to make a decision, you want to be front and center. And the way to do that is to, show the way that you're unique and special, and show, why you should be trusted. So like you come back to, it's all about trust. And if I know somebody and I know something and I know more, the more I know about what they do and what they can do and what their aspirations are, what they can do right now, what they'll be able to do in the future, the more I'm going to trust them. I would suggest figuring out what's unique about you and figuring out then how to present it in a way that is going to create more trust.
That's right. No, that's exactly. And I think you could not have said that more eloquently, because people do understand that the brand is the attraction, although I'm not sure how well we do that. And we can certainly talk about that on another show. But at the end of the day, that's the first level. The second level, to your point, is the content, which is the relationship, right?
Right.
So I think
it's about like, how do you create a 1-2 punch, right?
yeah,
Put
right.
yourself out there, make people know that you exist, but then introduce yourself. Who am I? Who you are. And that's content.
No, I love it. I love it. Listen, thank you so much for being on the show. The existing creating unique awareness, I think, is what I heard you say a couple of times. You want to create content that lets people know that you are uniquely qualified and or have the ability to connect with them on this. And then, the whole expertise, experience, and then case study idea. I mean, these are all great things. But at the end of the day, content is what we really need to do as supply chain marketing professionals. And Lisa, I appreciate all that you do for this industry. I will certainly give people the ability to reach out to you and the rest of the folks at Supply Chain Brain so that they can touch base with you guys on what they can do. And listen, folks, in the supply chain marketing space, getting ready for the next season of shows and conferences and anything that you're doing, make sure content is something that you put some time and effort into for what we talked about today, because we at Supply Chain Brain and Supply Chain Brain Media want your next 12 months to be your best year ever.
To discover how you can blend your marketing instruments into a harmonious sound and rise above the noise, schedule a 30-minute consultative session. Email morgan@supplychainbrainmedia.com. Again, that email address is morgan@supplychainbrainmedia.com. If you have any questions or episode suggestions, you can send those to morgan@supplychainbrainmedia.com. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Supply Chain Marketing Show presented by Supply Chain Brain Media. This is an omni-channel production in conjunction with PWE Media.